The next day started with Howell's Boys looking ripe for sale. Dr. Wallace's prediction that we should pick up this one stock for short selling seemed spot on. A lot of people in the market seemed to regard Harold Brothers as neckball stares. Sometimes the market had a mysterious power to it. Grab a person off the street and show him a glass jar of jelly beans, ask him how many jelly beans there were in a jar. People would give wild guesses, of course, but if you gathered hundreds of answers to find the average, it's possible to find out exactly how many jelly beans there were. And that was the wisdom of crowds. I didn't even need to go through everyone's account books to evaluate their assets. I already caught wind of Harold Brothers being considered the most rotten of a bunch. At the very least, the whole world worked with the assumption of a free market work like this. Is this a systematic short selling? We can't cast away that possibility. We can pray our destiny to be hunted down. But seeing Harold Brothers staggered like this felt like a reflection of the lunar surface's destiny. For people trusted Harold Brothers took a nosedive and it ended up suffering a bank run like bull stairs, there would be no way out anymore. I, the hero of the lunar surface, could only gaze at my trading screen as Harold Brothers' stock price lowered with each passing moment. Our main fund had kept on switching its positions to hard cash in order to avoid risk. Because all the investors in the world were doing similar things, every single asset's value was falling. I was aware that I was supporting that flow of things, but I couldn't hang on to something I knew was losing value. It was a fire at a movie theatre. You know, on an individual level, the rational move was to rush to the door, even if the door would be blocked by everyone else doing the same. Of course, there was greedy people around everywhere, and I was not made the lunar surface go round. Using a current situation to short sell in order to turn a profit was just its style. But I had no intention of even doing that. It was not out of ethical concerns, but because I didn't have a willpower to do that much. As I listened to Wallace's story, I couldn't help but think this was the end for the lunar surface. After a 25-year-long dream, reality had come to deal a nasty blow. It meant for the whole thing, companies prospering in a world with practically no government, anyone being able to become rich if they have the skills, always had a fine print. Fine print which said, only as long as everything goes well. It was impossible for everything to keep on going well. Besides, even at its peak, a lot of people fell from a dream of a lunar surface. This was the land of innocent children. There would always come a moment in the land of children would need adults to intervene. Everyone was forced to realise that it was a good reason why Earth government evolved in the form that it did. As if in retaliation for lunar surface's long dream, the displays were full of pessimistic news. Real estates were in a slump. Loans were defaulting. Real estate companies and investment companies providing them money kept going on bankrupt. So nearly all construction stopped out of blue. And even providers of raw materials were starting to feel the effects. Also, there was an explanation as to why the collapse of the real estate market meant that nearly everyone would be forced to pay loans with a price much higher than they were actually worth. That was because even if a house bought with $1 million more ended up being worth $500,000, the loan sum wouldn't decrease. Put simply, this meant an investment of $1 million more was shrunk to $500,000. When people ended up in this situation in stock investment, what do? After arriving in the pain of loss a while, there would come a moment where they were forced to accept the truth. Then with a dry laugh I would say that austerity started tomorrow. I started to think the recession on the lunar surface was unavoidable. Of course, that relied on the lunar surface and people living on it. People were still rushing for the orbital elevator. So what advantage would living on the lunar surface have? Besides, with government intervention, the rules of the game would change for sure. I mean, would companies and greedy people stay on the surface? And in of itself, there's no place for a human being to live. In order for it to continue, it must possess and keep hold of some attraction. What if people and companies leave a lunar surface and the environment can't be sustained anymore? What would happen? I sighed, muttering this. Well, we'd have to go back to Earth, wouldn't we? When we were born on the moon, we'd have no place to go back to. Ah, right. Would we be dealt with as refugees? We'd be able to manage as long as we had money, right? Marcus' words were so harshly realistic, I couldn't help but give a dry chuckle. Should we extend our malls for dollars and yen while we can, Ren? A lot of people are thinking the same though, so dollar to water ratio has taken a sharp drop. If no one wanted something, its price dropped. That was true of things and money. But then people on Earth who had securities and denominated in rules will suffer a loss just from that. If they take losses, investments will take a drop. If investments take a drop, economic activity will contract, the economy as a whole will take a downturn and people will be left out in the cold. My mind was filled with images of a Great Depression in the States, like an old black and white movie. On top of that, one must not forget the problems specific to the lunar surface. If the rules keep forcing like that, the price of import products will fly through the roof. Even without other problems, more and more people will be unable to scrape by. Well, how long peace and order were maintained? People break display windows rather than dicing on starvation because they can't afford food. The scariest thing isn't even having food, but being able to afford it. If every import company goes bankrupt tomorrow, we won't even be able to import the wheat needed to bake bread from Earth. And the result? I shrugged. But as you'd expect, the lunar surface would sooner or later be forced to close shop. A second later, Marco looked at me as if he was about to cry. Even if he was a fanboy of the Earth's 20th century, the lunar surface was his home country. There's a big difference between going on a day trip and buying a one-way ticket with no way back. However, I still giggled a bit at him. That's merely a pessimistic hypothesis. After all, if people act accordingly to dangerous scenario, most people know that things will reach that outcome. Which means you have a motivation for acting so that things don't turn that way. I guess. You also saw the decision of a VP and the big shareholders of Borstairs. Even if they knew they would be the only ones suffering huge losses, they sold themselves to E.J. Rockberg. Normally, that price would be unthinkable. But bearing in mind what would have happened if they hadn't sold, they had no choice but to do so. Christopher Deal was a decided thing from the start. And that was right on the mark. If people could be made aware of what was really important, most of the time they would prioritise it. Even if you were left with some money, it was meaningless if you had nothing else. Besides, which is exactly what Barton did to me. Besides, Earth is large. There must be some financial institutions who made it with barely a scratch. With time and willingness to do price reductions, things should sort themselves out. I sure hope they do. I'm not a doctor, but all we can do is pray. In order to get those fun days going, we had to endure some pain right now. Everyone knew that was easy to understand, but hard to actualise. At my sarcastic laugh, Marco displayed a crooked smile. If we had the money, we won with protection, it might have helped. When he realised he'd mutter this aloud, he clapped a hand over his mouth. I gazed at Marco across the desk. I won't get angry, you know. Sorry. I was a fool. On the contrary, I'm thankful you keep on working under me. As Marco had rightly said, with money of hundreds of millions of moles, we could have helped this critical situation. We could buy up toxic assets from financial institutions, and provide huge funds that would increase the possibility of avoiding a bank run. But Barton took those funds. That was the reality. When one was in the world of stock investment, one would necessarily encounter a dream of if and then. That's because when it came right down to it, even the most pessimistic being believed that things would be alright when we invested. But reality was always harsh. There was no precedent for wishes, prayers, and supplications to make things go right. The stock price of Howard Brothers was at a limit down. 1 hour and 30 minutes after market opening, this was the same vital signs in ceasing an operation room. It didn't take long for a phone to ring. Marco took the phone, handling the conversation in an even tone before calling my name. How? Yep. It's Kazanica. A giant bud had made its entrance in the china shop. That's what I was saying. Short sales are being conducted on a systematic level. The stocks are being sold at unfairly low prices. When I arrived at the General Government building, neither Station nor Wallace had arrived yet. Kazanica was talking nervously, unable to wait any longer. But I said that, judging from the volume, it must be naked short. I heard it's illegal. Short selling happened when you sold stock you borrowed from someone else. A naked short was the act of selling stock that didn't exist. As you neither owned it nor had borrowed it. Of course, such fraudulent transactions were forbidden, even in the world of finance, where you could create something out of nothing. However, although you heard about it sometimes, you never actually got to see it. Have you contacted the Stock Exchange Committee? Yes, a committee head took the orbital elevator and fled to Earth. 2 or 3 legal advisors have tendered their resignations. It seems their real estate investments ended in failure. They also said from now on, they'll have to earn their living as private lawyers, or they won't be able to put their daughters through college. That's capitalism. That's capitalism. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Bow. Her doctor's proposition to open the valve of a central bank. Will you apply it? Hearing my words, Gazanica palmed his face, as if he was trying to contain a headache. I heard his explanation. He also said it could lead to inflation, but above all, the political issue is too big. I could explain to you how difficult it is, but it wouldn't be like trying to describe a flu to someone who doesn't have it. The origin of this crisis lies with the absurd profits made by the financial institutions and real estate dealers. Lots of companies have nothing to do with it. There are thousands of companies on the stock market, and everyone's put at risk because of stupidity of less than 100 of them. For all who work seriously, it would be totally unacceptable. It would mean the country would cover gambling losses. The link between risk and return could also be inverted. It meant that if you took risks, you'd have to be prepared to obtain negative returns. So, you want to leave things as they are? Yes. And everyone understands this. In exchange for our help, the financial institutions will surely face retaliatory measures, surveillance, new rules, or special tax. Anyway, those who operate anywhere will surely leave the lunar surface. Also, they make 10 times more money than people who work by the sweat of their brows. They were the proof that immigrants could come to a lunar surface and make a fortune, you know. No matter our choice, we were faced with a dead end. Gazanica was grasping his stomach, eyes closed, an agonised look on his face. Then he spoke. That's why I intend to shut my eyes to some of the things that may happen. Do you have a plan? After he heard my question, Gazanica's lips were trembling as if he was about to cry. I curse the irony of a fate which forces me to tell you this. You've already made an awful request of me once before, Mr. President. And after I said this, Chris told me to ask the impossible, and that's what I'm doing. If failed, the President reacted to my words with a painful laugh. He took a deep breath and uttered the following words. Howell Brothers will hold their earning announcement tomorrow. They told me if you use their value model, the estimated value of held real estate bonds and insurance contracts, or something like that, it amounts to $7 billion. It's because the value of the funds invested in the real estate market keeps dropping. $7 billion is still quite a sum. If they made that public, Howell Brothers will surely suffer a bank run. That's why I begged for help. His eyes pierced me. For the assets, they want to go back to book value, and not fair market valuation. So they want their assets to be valued not by their actual value, but when they bought them. So they want to say that until they're sold, assets kept for value they had when they bought them, even if assets whose value was undoubtedly going down in the current situation. They had a point in the real estate market was effectively going down way too fast. This crisis passed, the whole mess of medical reports also settled. Maybe real estate prices would go up and recover their value. If that was the case, if we have a naive honesty to apply fair market value, in that kind of panic, it would only increase anxiety. Everyone would lose. That's probably their argument. I understood, but also felt Gazanica's pain. Because there's a reason that Gazanica got to his actual position in the first place. You know, Avalon have used the book value system. We're building many houses of cards. I know. After that, book value was buried. It was changed to fair market value. When you don't have the actual value of the assets and financial statements, you cannot gain the trust of a market. It's also easier for companies to commit fraud. I know. And we were the ones to expose their violations. I know that too. He was shouting and yelling. There is no other way. Try and make an estimated $7 billion loss. But like ball stairs all over again. How about financing? Well, we said we could do everything to make it happen. But I don't see it going well. And besides, we don't have enough time. Just try postponing the earning announcement. Just the anxiety it would generate would probably be like announcing indefinite how it promised to a market. When you say financing is not going well, you mean even selling though? For I was right when countdown to Harold Brother's death had already started. No. No? Well, that's precisely the cause of a problem. Exasperation and fatigue seemed to have taken a toll on Gazanica, who staggered as if anemic. In a rush, I tried to support him, but he held his hand up towards me, indicating that he was fine. Sorry, but if that's the cause, I also understand why they're feeling. What do you mean by the cause? Systematic short-selling. He kept on repeating that term. But I thought this was a fabrication, systematic short-selling. You could say this was the one term companies always use as an excuse for a company's stock plummeting. People from Harold Brothers think that someone might be forcing systematic short-selling to lower stock price and provoke a credit uncertainty. Bloody hell, that's Barton, isn't it? That's probably what Barton wanted our money for. It can't be. At least what they claimed over the phone. Can you just say that as they're good and ignore it? When someone talks about systematic short-selling, most of the time it's out their gourd. I said this as someone who was deeply involved in the market. Short-selling is a difficult investment. Just look at a doctor besides him. How many people do you think have succeeded at it? If systematic short-selling worked, everyone would be doing it. I don't know how much about investments of the economy. But I may not look it. I'm a politician, extremely sensitive to people's motives or hidden intentions. What does that mean? Now, the lunar surface is in a sorry state. Everyone's panicking. Fear is rampant everywhere. What will happen next? How will the future be? Things like that. Anyway, short-selling might indeed be difficult. However, I have some understanding of stock prices, even though it's just a hobby of mine. If you sell everything at once, things will go down. If you buy everything at the same time, they'll go up. You mean? That's all we need now. But short-selling meant you had to rebuy the stock after selling it. The reason short-selling was difficult was because that when people would try and take advantage. I tried to tell him this, but Gazanica cut me off with a single gaze. What if the goal was not to make money with the stock? What? You seen how the Bull Stairs deal went? Did a run to investment banks happen? For it to happen even once, you could buy a huge investment bank for an unbelievable sum. That's probably the way people see it too. He took a deep breath. I think the guys in investment banks saw it that way too. For just $4 a share. Bull Stairs market price as a whole was just the same as their main building. If you wanted to buy Bull Stairs a month before it happened, you'd need 15 or even 20 times more. If you had a rival, you can even go as far as 30 or 40 times. Even though people said they had corrupted assets, the company was not in deficit. It was way too cheap. The deal Chris and her team got was way too good to be true. We did not think it would be so simple, and others noticed how simple it was. And bank runs are just unreasonable. It's hard to predict when they happen. You look at a case on Earth, there are some caused simply by housewives chatting in the streets. Bank runs can easily happen, but they only happen with this prediction. Then they take advantage of that and buy everything cheap. Acts like this refers to as green mail. You hinted at a hostile takeover by buying up the shares of a company. Then you made profit by selling the shares at a high price to a company who didn't want to be bought. That's how green mail worked. It was close to a threat, but it was not illegal. The suspicion Harold Brothers had fallen under at the time was quite similar in this situation. They would be asked to sell their shares cheap if they didn't want to be crushed. Everyone could predict that if they did crumble, the economy would fall into chaos. The most profitable outcome, the company could be liquidated for peanuts. And nothing would be left for the creditors. If it happened, and just as Chris said, the only way to get money would be just sell the company. If the bank would happened, they would never be able to recover their trust by themselves. Which is another factor adding to anxiety. When it would be too late, we had to proceed with extreme caution, even if people laughed at us and said we were just overthinking things or just being nervous. But what disgusted me about the fact was this sort of caution ought to be used even for ordinary investors. If they'd been careful, they would never have done something so stupid as selling a contract for compensating 10 million malls of risky securities for 700,000. They probably would not have become absorbed into real estate investments. And it would not have resulted in a 7 billion more loss. The reason Kazanika's suffering was he understood all of this, was still trying to do his best to reduce, even a little, the chance of Harold Brothers falling into a bank run. I was not in a position to take responsibility, but I could tell him the truth. But Kazanika was under public scrutiny. For all this, he was trying to make the difficult decision of bringing back the dirty accounting method used by Avalon. meant that they were practically asking for help in concealing a 7 billion more lost from their account settlements. We were the ones who defeated Avalon. How could we do something like this? But did we have another choice? And the people of Howard Brothers may well have a good reason to be afraid. Does that mean you have a proof that a group of speculators is after them? Unfortunately, there were people who colluded in order to manipulate stocks. It did not always go well, so it's not like such groups could split the market. However, there were powerful groups of speculators who did have certain influence. And if you compared it to investment banks who were operating on the side of a market system, they were like amateurs next to professionals. The amounts invested were just incomparable. As I gave him an anxious look, Gazanica shook his head. No, it's just that someone went to Howard Boys asking for advice. Advice? Some company came saying they could be the target of such dangerous transactions and asked for help in raising capital. In this situation, they asked Howard Brothers for help? Of course, the person who told me violated confidentiality. She said she could not keep it all to herself. She was crying, saying she would not regret hiding for her whole life if anything were to happen. Which company was it? Gazanica spoke weakly as if he was talking about something he could not handle anymore. And we're going to take a break. And you can join me again next time when we find out. But it was probably Barton who did it.